and I forgot to mention Tony Kukoc, who was one of the
Oh,
first international players to come over. And the thing with Tony Kukoc was the Chicago Bulls, when they drafted him, they saw him as the future past Michael Jordan, past Scottie Pippen. It didn't necessarily work out that way because, of course, Jordan retired and then came back, and then Pippen didn't leave. So Tony Kukoc actually was a six man off. He was the first man off the bench. He was a six man, but he had the talent to lead his own franchise. So Michael Jordan even said last night, um, and Scottie Pippen as well, that Tony Kukoc had made the biggest sacrifice on the team because he had superstar talent, but on that
mhm.
team he had to be the sixth man. So all those guys are related, even with him, Detlef Shrimp, Sabonis, Rick Smits, all those guys that opened the door for Powell, Mark, Dirk. Yeah, it's amazing. It's really amazing. And I think they said last night this is the seventh straight year where there's over 100 international players in the NBA. And considering there's only 400 some odd players in the
Wow.
NBA, that's a huge chunk. That's a huge chunk. So
That's a larger number than I would have guessed.
yeah, I believe they said it was 117. Don't quote me on it, but it was somewhere in there. But they definitely said it was over 100. So yeah, the NBA is full of foreign players, and it
Mhm.
all started with those guys. Um, and they have a great legacy. So
Mhm.
I just mentioned Tony Kukoc. Other players that were enshrined were Chris Webber, Paul Pierce, Ben Wallace, and Chris Bosh. So tell me how you feel about those guys.
Well, I feel like they're all deserving of being there. There's unfortunately there is like I don't know as much about a certain time in NBA history as others. There's a lot I'm missing in my knowledge. I'm not scared to admit that. Paul Pierce and like Chris Bosh are and Chris Webber. Those are the names. Like I know I've seen a lot of Pierce and Bosh. Um,
Mhm.
I've seen a little Webber. Like, but I can't really speak to him with any kind of knowledge. Like I just can't. But I know Paul Pierce and Bosch, what they did in the time frame which I got to really pay attention and know what was going on. There's no doubt in my mind that those guys deserve to be there. I mean, championship caliber. Um, were shown to be able to lead their teams. Bosch, I know when he won his championships with Miami, he took a backseat to those guys, but it was for a team dynamic that obviously bred success and championships, and he showed up to that point that he was able to do it on his own anyways in Toronto. So, and I don't need to speak to I don't really think I have to explain why Pierce deserves to be on there with his championships and what he did over the length of his career, especially on some of those championship teams. Uh, how he was leaned on in some ways, like he was in a lot of ways the heart, and I mean him, Garnett, and Ray Allen, of course. Like it was that trio, and then Rondo came in later. But I mean, he was like him and Garnett, they were the go-to guys to be able to just get a bucket. Paul Pierce always made things look awkward, but he was just so reliable in so many ways. So in my eyes, both of those guys, and without really knowing too much, I'm not going to knock the other guys for being on the list. I think all of them deserve to be there. And um, yeah, what do you think?
Well, one of the hardest NBA players I've ever critiqued, as far as the one I've been the hardest on, was Chris Webber. But let me go back and say something. The Nate Smith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame is the Basketball Hall of Fame. So it covers high school, college, international, and pro level basketball. Okay. With that said, with that said, Chris Webber's short but impactful college career is the reason why I would say, okay, his NBA career was full of letdown. Let me explain. He was a super talented athlete, Mentally, he wasn't there a lot of the times. When either of his teams needed a big shot, but I'm going to say specifically on Sacramento because that's where he had his most success at, he would shy away from the moment. Okay. Even with Washington a little bit, he would shy away from the moment. Um, and it always rubbed me the wrong way because it's like, if you're going to be the guy, Mike Bibby, Jason Williams, Peja Stojakovic, they shouldn't have the ball in their hand the entirety of the fourth quarter. You need to have that. And it was always like he would run away from that moment. So that it always left a sour taste in my mouth about Chris Webber. Um, so I was against, just as I will be against and always against T Mac being in the Hall of Fame. I'm against Chris Webber being in the Hall of Fame. But I
Hmm.
watched it. Um, and he's a great guy. He's done great things off the court for the community, for the youth. He's a great guy. He's a historian. Like he's great. It's nothing personal against Chris Webber. Just as a basketball player, I don't think he qualifies for the Hall of Fame, which we know is the weakest Hall of Fame in all of sports for someone to get into. So we do know that. But he gave a great speech last night, and he thanked my basketball idol last night, who helped present him to the Hall of Fame. So I was like, "Damn it, you're trying to get me to like you," you know. But he thanked Charles Barkley, so that was a neat little exchange they had. Charles was up there all night, but that's for another day. Um, Everything you said about Paul Pierce is 100% accurate. Just you can't say anything wrong about Paul Pierce. You just can't. Like he was almost a perfect NBA player. He was just a little slow. You said he was awkward. That was right, but he could still get to his spots. He could
Hmm.
get to his spots, and he would kill you in the mid range. As far as Ben Wallace, ferocious, and was usually the smallest center on the court every night at like 6'8", 6'9".
I
You
forgot to
couldn't
even
tell it.
talk about Ben Wallace, and I could have talked
No,
about Ben Wallace. I forgot.
no,
Yeah,
you're
nothing
good.
bad
Yeah,
about him either. Like I remember him watching uh, the way the Detroit team would play, especially in the finals, how they dealt with those Lakers teams. Um,
mm,
yeah, I mean, you don't even see that kind of basketball like that grind anymore. Like kind of like what we talked about with Memphis earlier, how they played. You know,
right.
Detroit had that rough style basketball that Detroit was known for forever.
Mm,
So, real quick, not to cut you off, but I forgot I didn't even talk about Ben at all, and I have nothing but respect for him and that team and how they played, but especially the tenacity that he played with because like you said he was usually one of the smaller or the smallest center, one of the smallest centers, and he was in it every night playing
right,
physical and hard, and he
right,
was successful and his team was successful because of it.
right. I mean,
So
ferocious. I've never seen. Hey, look, he's an old country Bama boy. I've never seen him back down from anybody. Okay, um, and he's only the second four-time Defensive Player of the Year winner. It's him and Dikembe Mutombo. They're in a class all by themselves. Okay, so definitely deserved NBA champion. Ben Wallace is one of the greatest defensive players I've ever seen in my life. And then we go to Chris Bosh. Um, his career was cut short due
mhm.
to blood clots, blood thinning, all that. Um, and you're right, he did sacrifice a lot for that team to win championships because Chris Bosh wasn't known as a great defender coming out of Toronto, and when he got to Miami, his defense just went to an all-time high. Okay, um, even to where LeBron and Wade. I say out of the three, Chris Bosh played the most defense out of the three. Okay, and could still pull up for the mid range, could pull up for three. Um, as his idol, Kevin Garnett, they're very similar. Uh, Nothing bad to say about Chris Bosh at all. And we know he's a sensitive guy, and that was portrayed in his Hall of Fame speech, which was one of the best I've ever heard, where he just talked about life and put things in perspective, things that we take for granted that are taken for us, like basketball, for instance, for him. Um, so it was a great night. And it's one of those nights that reminds me of why I love the sport so much. I shed a couple of tears. I feel like a bitch sometimes. I shed a couple of tears. Um, but yeah, it was a great night. And those guys, outside of Weber, I will continue to say that those guys deserved it. Even the ladies, Lauren Jackson and Yolanda Griffin, who played in WNBA. well deserved, great players. I mean, it was a fantastic night, man. And then Bill Russell,
Bill Russell's in there twice now.
right? Bill Russell going in as a coach, which I mean, he was the first African American coach in all the sports, and won championships as a player and a coach. So like he was playing and he was coaching and won a championship. How ridiculous is
Yeah, it's almost like what LeBron's doing now, a little different.
that? So speaking of LeBron, so of course it was a Heat night. I didn't know Bosch was going to go last. I thought Bosch would go maybe second. I thought Pierce was going to go last because he's the most accomplished of all of them. So I thought Pierce was going to go last, but they had Bosch last. So I saw a lot of Heat dignitaries in the crowd, and I was like, I don't see LeBron. I wonder if LeBron's going to be there because I don't see LeBron in a lot of Hall of Fame stuff. I just don't. And then I
Hmm.
saw him, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And they didn't make a big deal out of him being there. He was just in the crowd. They didn't flash on him a lot. They flashed on Wade more than they flashed on LeBron. So I thought that was neat
Hmm.
because he was there supporting, supporting Chris Bosh. Um, I thought that was really neat, and kudos to him for doing that because he doesn't do a lot of events like that. So that kind of meant a little bit to me, being a Heat fan, of course, and seeing the big
Hmm.
three all there again. So yeah, good night. It was a great night,
Hmm.
man.